Hello, and welcome to our series where we're going to be covering a range of topics that will help you make better decisions about your money. I'm Corin Jacker. Today we're going to be focusing on young adults, 15 to 16 year olds who are at school, getting their first job and will be leaving school soon to go on to further study or enter the workforce, and will be faced with a range of decisions in relation to managing their money. We're going to look at buying your first car, getting your first job and what to expect, going on to further study and what support you might be able to receive. Then when you're actually earning money, we're going to go through some of the things you need to consider in starting to save money. And then we're going to go through some tips and traps in relation to online shopping, mobile phones, credit cards and gambling. Let's start by looking at your first car. For many, this will be the largest purchase you'll initially make when you save up money. Now, if you're still getting lifts of other people when you're 25, there could be a range of reasons, but one of the main reasons is you may not have anticipated the costs of buying and owning your own car. There are a number of costs that we need to consider. Registration to get the car on the road, servicing to make sure the car's running well, insurance to make sure you and others are protected, petrol to keep it running, and if we borrow money to buy the car, we're looking at loan repayments. Let's look at an example of two different cars and the difference it can make in terms of how much money you need to spend to keep these cars on the road. So in our first example, we've got a 2011 Holden Commodore, so it's a bit newer. It's done 64,000 kilometres, so not too many kilometres. It's a bigger car, and in this case, it's going to cost around $14,000. In both our examples, we're assuming we're going to take out a fairly typical car loan or a personal loan. So we're looking at 9.5% interest rate over a 3-year period. Both cars will have a set of ongoing costs. So for our Holden Commodore, we've got some insurance at about $1,100 a year, registration just under $600 a year, petrol $300 a month, and servicing a couple of times a year of $750 for an older car like that. For the first 3 years of holding this car, the running costs will average out at about $1,037 a month. Let's compare that to a slightly older car, a 2007 Holden Astra, a slightly smaller car. It's done more kilometres. We're still going to lend the money for it, but obviously we're not lending as much in this example. We're going to have insurance, but it's probably going to be less insurance given the lower value of the car. Registration will be the same. Petrol could be cheaper because it's not a larger car, so it might cost a little bit less to run, and servicing will be cheaper as well. In this example, the total approximate cost of running this car is about $550 a month. So it's almost half the cost of running the other car. So about $500 a month is a significant difference for someone who's buying their first car. So the key takeout here is we've got to remember the car is something that's going to get us from point A to point B. We want the car that's going to be the cheapest to do that and still be safe and reliable. So there's lots of options out there. We don't have to get a red car because it's going to make us go faster. It won't. We don't have to get a fancy car because it's going to make us look sexy or tougher. It won't. So be sensible about this. Don't be caught up in marketing. Don't be caught up in hype. Don't be caught up in trying to look better than someone else. Get the car that's going to do the job for you. Get you from point A to point B. So let's look at getting your first job. Some of you may already have your first job, some others will be coming up. But let's look at what we can expect to get out of our first job. Okay, you might get complete and utter satisfaction in your first job. If you're lucky enough to work with somebody that serves ice cream, you might get the opportunity to enjoy scooping ice cream while wearing an apron.
I believe that opportunity looks a lot like hard work. When I was 13, I had my first job with my dad carrying shingles up to the roof. And then I got a job washing dishes at a restaurant. And then I got a job in a grocery store deli. And then I got a job at a factory sweeping Cheerio dust off the ground. And I've never had a job in my life that I was better than. I was always just lucky to have a job. And every job I had was a stepping stone to my next job. And I never quit my job until I had my next job. And so opportunities look a lot like work.
One of the things your first job will give you is your first payslip, which we'll go through in one moment. But I found it really interesting, that talk. Opportunity looks a lot like hard work. One of the things that young people of today probably already have a pretty good understanding of is that the workforce they're going into is very, very different from the workforce that I went into, my parents went into, or my grandparents went into. Research conducted by the Foundation of Young Australians, and one of their reports, the New Work Mindset, indicated that people leaving school today could look at potentially 5 different careers over their working life, possibly 17 different employers. And they suggested, instead of looking at things in terms of a particular job, it's probably more relevant to look at things in what you want to do in life by looking at particular clusters. And those clusters have similar skill sets. And one of the interesting things that they found is that each job that you take on, you pick up an average of 13 different skills that can be applied to different jobs. So your first job might be what you think is to be a mundane, boring job, but opportunity looks a lot like hard work. Don't think you're better than that job. Take the time to get those skills in that job, move it to the next job. Pick up the skills in that job, move it to the next job. If you've got an idea of where you're looking at wanting to go in the future, then start trying to identify skills that's relevant for that industry or that cluster. So in my case, a financial planner, I'm in the cluster of an informer. So skills that we might need include data analysis, report writing, financial analysis, problem solving, communication skills, the ability to teach. So there's lots of other roles that will have those kind of skills that will help you lead to a role within this cluster. Let's look at your first payslip. Your first payslip is really important to understand because it almost reflects the contract arrangement that you've taken out with your employer. It'll show a number of things that are important and relevant to you. It'll show things like how much you're being paid per hour, how many hours you've worked, whether this tax is being deducted, what superannuation is being deducted, and where that superannuation is going to. And it's really important to make sure you're getting what you're entitled to, and don't just take it for granted. There is enormous amounts of stories over recent years of employers, both large and small, underpaying staff, not paying super. So we need to make sure you're getting what you're entitled to. In relation to superannuation, if you're getting your first job, you'll be asked what super fund you want to go into. Now, what we need to look for here with superannuation, this is something that you're not going to see for the next 40 years, but it's going to be really important for your life in retirement. So what we want, first of all, is low cost. Now, to put that in perspective, the average super fund in Australia charges around 1.1%. So if your super fund that's being offered to you has fees of less than around 1%, and make the effort to find out, then you're on the right track. The next thing is that because you're not going to be seeing this money for a long time, we want to put it into a high growth option. It's going to be more volatile, it's going to go up and down like a yo-yo more often, but because you can't touch it, that doesn't matter. It's going to give you the highest probability of a high return throughout your working life. So low cost, high growth fund. In terms of what you can expect from your employer and to make sure you're getting what's entitled, there are a number of things your employer can make you do, like wearing a name tag, making you work on the weekend, or heaven forbid, make you actually work. But there are a couple of things they have to make sure they provide you. Firstly, a safe work environment, and to make sure you are being paid correctly. So Fair Work Australia will have a lot of information on what you should be getting paid. So if you're not sure or you don't think you're getting paid right, make sure you contact Fair Work Australia, and Fair Work Ombudsman will make sure that you're provided with a safe workplace. When you finish school, some of you may be entering the workforce, some of you may be going on to trades or apprenticeships, and some of you may be going on to university or tertiary education. So let's look at some of these aspects. In relation to tertiary education, you're going to be spending many thousands of hours studying on, hopefully, a subject that you're passionate about and will lead you to a satisfying career. It's going to cost money to study. They're going to charge you to do the course, and there's going to be costs that are going to be required to be paid alongside the actual fees for the university. And there are a number of places you can get support. So your mum and dad mutual fund might help you with that. The HECS help and fee help systems are what actually pay for most people's course, and I'll go through that in one moment. You may be entitled to benefits from Services Australia or Centrelink, such as youth allowance. And if you're going through an apprenticeship scheme, there are other sets of entitlements that you may be able to be eligible for. In terms of HECS help and fee help, so these are effectively loans from the government that you take on when you take on tertiary education. They're effectively zero interest, so they'll index with inflation, but effectively they'll have no real interest rate applied to them. You only pay them back when you start earning over certain thresholds. The HECS help is what effectively pays for your course, and fee help can be a loan that you can apply for that can help with tuition, laptops, other things you might need to help you study. So studyassist.gov.au has a lot more information about that. Don't forget, you may also be entitled to other benefits from places like Services Australia or Centrelink. So have a look at servicesaustralia.gov.au, and they'll have a lot of information about what young people can be entitled to if you're working, looking for work, or training. For apprentices, the apprenticeship scheme is basically a system where you work and study simultaneously to get your qualification. It's organised by a Fair Work Commission, so again, if you feel like you're not getting your entitlements or you're not provided with a safe workplace, then contact the Fair Work Commission and make sure you're getting what you're entitled to. So the next thing we're going to look at now is when you're actually starting to earn money, what we start doing with it apart from spending it. So we're going to look at what we need to consider when we're starting to save money. So the first thing to look at is structuring your bank accounts. So we want a low-cost savings account. So that's a fund or an account where you'll have money in that you'll use for everyday spending. So you want to make sure you've got good low-cost fees on that, preferably nil fee options. Most institutions will then have some form of savings account that you can sit beside that. And some of them will have systems where if you put money into it each month and don't take out any withdrawals, you get a bonus saving interest rate. So often it's a good idea to have your everyday account set up and then your savings account set up. And one of the other benefits, apart from potentially earning a little bit more interest on it, is it's one step removed from spending it. If you want to spend that money, you need to move it out of there before you spend it. Having those little barriers to entry can help you save money and resist the temptation to spend it in the future. Once you get beyond that, there are a number of apps that can start to help you in terms of managing your money. So first of all, there's a number of budgeting apps out there that can help you start to understand what income you're earning and what you're spending, and make sure you're starting to get a handle on that. Budgeting and understanding your cash flow is one of the most important skills that you can develop going through your working life. Many adults don't have an understanding of what's coming in versus what's going out, and they cannot identify where it gets spent and how they can potentially save. There's a couple of ways we can look at budgeting, and as I said, there's a number of apps out there that can help you with this. The first way is from a bottom-up approach. So we look at writing down or documenting every dollar you're spending, and then working out how much it is and then how much is left over that you can save. For many people, that simply doesn't work. The other way is to look at a top-down approach, whereas to say, well, how much money do I want to be able to spend as a total figure, and you stick within that, and then you work out how much you should be able to save around that. A couple of rules of thumbs to start with in relation to saving that are really simple. If you don't have any debts, then you should be at least saving 20% of the income you earn. If you have a loan to pay off, you pay off the loan and you save 10% on top of that. So this is not only when you first leave school, first enter the workforce, this is good rules of thumb for your working life. If you're still at home and you're able to live at home and work and save money, you should be aiming to save 50% of your income. So 10% if you've got a debt, 20% no debt, and if you're living from home, 50%. So there's some couple of really simple rules of thumb there that can help you get a handle on that budget and set you up with some good habits going forward. So what I want to look at now is how we can save our money, and I want to look at the concept of compound interest. This concept of compound interest is probably the most important mathematical concept in relation to your money that you can take with you through your working life. Hopefully you've covered this off in your classes, but if not, let's go through it in a bit of detail here. So the difference is we've got simple interest and compound interest. Simple interest is just calculating the amount of interest is paid on your savings. And then that interest is paid out, and then the next period the interest is calculated again and that's paid out. Compound interest is the interest that's earned is reinvested within the investment, and then you get interest on that interest. So it's compounding on top of each other. Let's look at what impact the different have. So in a simple interest example, we've got $1,000, we're earning 7% interest rate. We're going to put a period in here for 35 years. I'm doing this because I want to give you an idea of long-term savings capacity. In that time frame, we earn interest of about $2,450, making our total balance around $3,450. Now, compound interest. We have $1,000, we have 7% interest, we have 35 years. This example though, we're reinvesting the interest that we earn and get that earning interest as well. In this case, the total interest earned now is $9,677 for a total balance of $10,677. Significantly different, and the longer the time frame, the more powerful this becomes. So when you're looking at your superannuation fund, which I'll look at in the example in a moment, and if you're looking at as a savings account, then this is some good principles to start putting in place. Because let's look at combining a regular savings plan and compound interest. So this is exactly what happens with your superannuation fund, or if you set up your own investment plan, like one of the apps that are available online at the moment, and start doing this, this is what can happen over time as well. So in this example, we've got $1,000, but we're going to now save an extra $100 a month. And we're going to keep doing that for the 35 years. So we're actually going to contribute a total of $43,000 to this investment. Still going to earn the same 7% in this example. But in this case, now the interest you earn is $139,367 for a total balance of $182,600. Sorry, $182,000 $367. A big difference from the $3,450 that we had in our simple interest example. So a key takeout here is use the power of compound interest. When you're saving, when you're investing, reinvest the income. Continue to do that. And with your savings that you've developed, with those rules of thumbs of 10%, 20% or 50%, keep saving each month, each period. Keep adding to it, and it starts to make a significant difference. Next thing we're going to look at is starting to look at some of the tips and traps in relation to some of the ways you can spend your money. One of the things to keep in mind is that once you start earning money and you're a young adult, there's going to be lots of companies out there who are going to take your money off you. And through internet shopping, there are many people who are going to want to try and do that by scamming you. So we need to be really careful of buying online. It is an area that's growing rapidly in the way people are purchasing their products rather than physical bricks and mortar stores, but it can be a big difference when things go wrong. There are lots of things for sale on the internet at the moment. It doesn't really matter what you want to buy, it's more about how you buy it and where you buy it from. You want to make sure you're dealing with secure websites. You want to make sure that you're using strong passwords. You want to make sure that your computer has good, strong, up-to-date antivirus software. And not just for online shopping, but for anything you're doing on the internet, you want to limit the amount of information you provide. Just give them what's required to make the transaction.
I wanted to buy a magazine subscription as a birthday present for my friend. I found this online website overseas that offered cheap subscriptions. So I paid for a year's subscription, but nothing ever arrived. I went back to the website and they had an email address, so I sent them an email, but they never got back to me. My friend had a look at the website and she said it didn't even have the padlock thing that tells you it's secure. I contacted the fair trading office and they said that this particular company had no protections for Australian customers, so there was nothing that they could do. They said that I didn't have the same consumer law protection I'd had from an Australian website. I sent the company some more emails to try and get my money back, but I still haven't got it. That was nearly a year ago. I've bought other things online since then, no problem. Although I've discovered there are some things you have to consider and should look for when you're making a purchase online. Regardless of what you're buying, you have to know that you can trust the seller. The first thing to make sure of is that the site is secure. The address of a secure site contains an S after the HTTP, like HTTPS, and I always check the site and the seller's reputation. I take time to read over the customer's feedback about the seller, and I found that if the website you're shopping with has an easy to find physical address, phone number, email, and other contact information, there's a greater chance that it's a safe and secure site.
Some really good information there about not only looking at the secure sites, but also to see whether there is that phone number, that address. If you do have a problem, make sure you contact your bank immediately. And also, if you feel like there has been a problem where somebody has ripped you off, provided you with something that wasn't what they said they were going to, contact the Department of Fair Trading and they'll see whether you're entitled to getting anything back from that online transaction. Let's look next at mobile phones. Mobile phones can be a real trap sometimes in terms of how much money you spend on the phone, but also how much you spend on the usage of the phone as well. Particularly where we're using a lot more data, sometimes we can potentially get caught with paying a lot of money to our telephone provider if we've gone over that data. So what we need to do is first understand what we need when we're buying a mobile phone. Now again, this is an area where there's a lot of marketing, a lot of hype. So these companies are trying to target you to buy the next most up-to-date phone when it might only be 6 months after the last one was released. So you probably don't need to spend another $1,000 on a new phone if you've got one that was only purchased 6 months or 12 months ago. So get an understanding of what you need out of a phone and what your phone's giving you, and do you really need what the new phones are providing? If not, don't fall for the marketing. Second thing is to look at, should you buy it outright or should you buy it on the contract? It is often a lot better if you can to buy a phone outright. The second thing is to look at whether you go on a plan, or if you're needing to stick to a budget, the prepaid options might be a good use of money for you. But it is not difficult to find a phone well less than a couple of $100 that you might be able to buy outright and go on a plan that's giving you unlimited calls, unlimited text and unlimited data for potentially less than $20 a month. You don't necessarily need to go on a plan that's going to provide a phone for $1,000 and potentially $80 or $100 a month. So again, ignore the marketing, ignore the hype, get a phone that works for what you want it to do and pay on a plan or prepaid only what you need to. The next thing we want to look at is credit cards. Just like I've said before, a lot of companies wanted to take your money from you when you start earning it. And the banks with their credit cards are a good example of that. When you first get an account, you're likely to receive what's called a debit card, which you're able to spend, but you're spending your own money. A credit card is borrowed money where an interest rate will apply. And it's not just credit cards now, it's the pay on instalment programs that are available as well. All of them will have an interest rate or a fee that will effectively mean you'll pay more than what you should have paid for the item.
About 6 months after I started working, I thought it was time for a holiday with my girlfriend. I saw that I could apply to increase my credit card limit to $5,000. I filled out a few forms online and then I got the credit increase. How easy was that? So we took a holiday together to Los Angeles. We did all the touristy stuff. It was awesome. I used the card to pay for everything and planned to come back home and pay it off a bit each week. But I lost my job and then I couldn't make the repayments. The interest was so high. I spoke with the lender as there was a change in my circumstance since I took out the credit card. I also saw a financial counselor who helped with a repayment plan. I didn't want a bad credit rating to affect my ability to take out a loan in the future. Anyhow, now I don't sign anything unless I know what it means. I'm also trying to build up a good savings buffer so I don't have to rely so much on credit.
Let's look at an example. In this case, we've got $5,000 owing on a card, which isn't that hard to accumulate. When you get a card, you might buy some furniture for the house you're in, you might buy a new TV, you might buy a new phone, you might go on a holiday. All of a sudden we've got $5,000 owing on our card. Interest rates at the moment are around 20% on credit cards. One of the traps is, when statements are provided on credit cards, they'll often say that the minimum repayment is a small amount. So it's usually only around 2% of the balance. So how long do we think it'll take to pay back a credit card with a $5,000 debt in those circumstances? And this is an example of compound interest, but it's in reverse. You're paying them interest and they're charging you interest on interest. And in this case, $5,000 would take 45 years to pay back. So be very careful with credit cards. If you use a credit card in the future, make sure it is always paid out in full each month. Don't get caught by the marketing hype around credit cards, around point systems and loyalty schemes. Just use it for shopping for things you would normally buy. Try and get a low-cost, fee-free credit card or a low interest rate if you do happen to accumulate a debt. But my rule of thumb with credit and borrowing money is you only ever want to borrow money for something that's going to appreciate in value. So that means spending on things on the credit card is not. Buying a car is not. We want to use saved up money for things that will depreciate in value. We want to save our lending for things that will appreciate in value, like a home in the future. The last thing I want to look at today is gambling. The reason why I've included this topic, I'd like to thank Love the Game Not the Odds website and also non-for-profit organisation Sport and Life Training for their input into this. This is a really dangerous area. Again, there are a lot of companies out there who want to take your money from you, and global gambling companies are certainly in that category. In the last year alone, there were some 4,000 gambling ads on TV. So it is very, very difficult to avoid the marketing and the advertising that goes around gambling. It's resulted in a range of different gambling activities, and they'll keep changing it to make it exciting, to make it interesting. But it's all designed to psychologically make you spend more money. So before you even interact with any of these organisations, understand it for what it is. You will lose money gambling. You will never win money gambling. It is not an investment. Now, I'm not going to say never gamble, but what you need to do is treat it like you would other forms of entertainment. If you're happy to spend $20 going to the movies and you're just as happy to lose $20 on a horse race, that's okay. But don't ever think you could then spend another $20 to win back that first one. It will not happen in the long run. These companies are very sophisticated. They've been developing apps aimed at young children to groom them into what it's like to gamble. And their aim is to get you addicted. So be very careful before you fall into the trap. Australia has become now probably the biggest per capita gambling nation on earth. Have an understanding if you or someone you know may have a problem. If you're thinking about it everywhere you are, at school, at work, at footy, if you start chasing your losses, you have a problem. If you go beyond any set limits, or if you don't set any limits, as I said before, if you want to bet $20 and once it's gone, that's the entertainment finished, that's fine. But once you start putting more money into it to get it back and chase those losses, you have a problem. If you then don't have any money for the essential things, you definitely have a problem. This will affect you, it will affect your family, it will affect your relationships, it could affect your employment, and it could affect the rest of your life. It is simply not worth it. If you or someone you know has a problem, Gamblers Help will be able to support you with that. So, some of my key messages from today's session are: remember, these are all decisions you're going to start making as you finish school, enter the workforce, enter study. The first one about the car. Don't be fooled again by the marketing. Don't be fooled by the hype. Get something that's safe and reliable for the lowest cost that gets you from point A to point B. Be smart about that decision. When you start working, make sure you're engaged with what you're getting paid and that it's correct, and make sure you're engaged with the superannuation fund that you are selecting or that you have had selected for you. Make sure it's low cost, high growth. Remember, when you start working, think about that concept of aiming for what cluster of a profession you'd like to aim for and what skills that profession might look for or that cluster might look for. And then when you get a job, identify those skills so you can get out of the job and take you to the next one. If you go to university, make sure you look at the help you can get, not only for the HECS debt, but also you might be able to get the fee help as well for tuition and laptops and other items you might need. When you start saving money, look at a low-cost, fee-free bank account with a good savings account next to it. Look at some of the apps online for the investment apps. Look at some of the budgeting apps. Start to get engaged with understanding your money. But remember the simple rules. 10% if you're in debt, save. 20% save if you don't have any debt. And if you're living at home and you've got your first job, start saving 50% of your income. And understand the power of compound interest. Start putting savings away, reinvesting it, and adding to it each month. It will make a significant difference. And if you do that, and in the future use that to buy a deposit on a home, repay the debt, and start saving again, it will make a significant difference. Keep these rules of thumbs going through with you for the rest of your working life. When you start spending money online, with phone plans, with credit cards, be smart. Don't borrow for things that don't grow. And don't spend more on things than you need to. And with gambling, it is an expense. It is not an investment. It will lose money. So keep in mind where it should sit in your budget. Thank you.